You already know that I was going to come on for this one. By the way, just to let y'all know, in case I get questions like, hey, why haven't you done your breakdown, your prediction? Well, I actually did it last night, yesterday. So it's on the channel. Check it out, guys. I'm surprised that it only got a couple views, but I could understand because it's a very long video. But I did elaborate somewhat on all of my points. And I believe that I think I elaborated pretty well, to be honest. It was right off the top of my head. I was gonna do a written type of breakdown and prediction, but I thought, you know what? I don't have time for this. I just want to get this one in very quickly. But I did get it in. And yes, I'm picking Caleb Plant still by unanimous decision. And let's talk about it, man. Fight week, it's already here. uh a lot of people are amped up about it. A lot of fans, boxing fans, are amped up about it. We're really gonna see what's gonna happen Judgment Day this coming Saturday for the first undisputed champion at super middleweight. It's a lot to take in, to be honest, but I'm not even nervous, to be quite fair with y'all. But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, what happens afterwards for both of these guys? And obviously, everyone loves to talk about what Canelo will do after a fight. And pretty much everybody can guess that easily. But what happens if Caleb Plant wins? Think about that for a second. And there was something else that I wanted to talk about, but um, so far, like it's just a lot of like hype around this fight. Uh, well-deserved hype, not artificial hype, which is what a lot of people misconstrue the word hype for. It being like a hype job, they associate it with like different types of words, but hype can mean very positive things. It can mean very negative things at the end of the day. So, um, we already know what's gonna happen if Canelo wins. Like everyone knows like the paths that he will take, and he has a lot of opponents lined up for him. You know, like he could pick and choose anyone that he wants, and I believe that he's gonna stay on the PBC side. But we already know like the path that like I said before, we already know that Canelo's path is very easy to predict, you know, like cuz he's a very big star in the sport of boxing, but it would be a shakeup if Caleb Plant beat him this coming Saturday. And you got to think about the world when Caleb Plant wins, like with the boxing world in general. Like, what happens? Like, how does this affect everything? How does this affect boxing as a whole, or just the sport itself? You know, because it already has like a new, fresh face if Caleb Plant beats him. And a lot of people are thinking that he's not gonna beat him at all. You know, like these type of odds are kind of lining up with the comparisons of Andy Ruiz versus AJ, which I think is completely farce. But at the same time, I can understand why somebody would think that because, you know, like they see Andy Ruiz as this big underdog. But when it comes to a stylistic matchup like a Canelo versus Plant, we've been under the impression of like fighters being immortal. Like we immortalize fighters sometimes. Like even though Canelo is deserving of his accolades, he is deserving of a lot of stuff, but at the same time, he's not immortal like a lot of other fighters out there that a lot of people perceived as immortal. So, um, my opinion is that Caleb Plant beats him. And if y'all want to hear the detailed breakdown, you could listen to it on my other video. It's the last video that I made before this live that I'm currently making right now. So Canelo, he's a heavy favorite in this fight. And they would mess up a lot of things like casinos, it would mess up a lot of betting. People would win money, like big time money in certain areas. Excuse me, I was had some gas held in, but all these casinos, everybody that's invested into Canelo winning is going to be making money that night. But at the same time, if Caleb Plant wins, everybody that bet a certain amount of cash is going to end up winning huge. And I mean huge. It's probably like some of the biggest prices that I've ever heard, you know, like in a boxing type of event. I've heard 11 stacks, and I'm like, what the heck, man? If I put, makes me wonder, like maybe I should have put more on this fight than what people are led on to believe, that Canelo's just gonna steamroll Caleb Plant like that. But I don't believe that. And at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, hmm, maybe I should have put like $500 on there. But then again, I'm not even like conscious or self-aware of like the whole how things work, like in the market of gambling or anything like that, how websites work, none of that. I don't know nothing, man, about any of that. And if I did, who knows? Who knows? And maybe not. But I don't mind taking friendly bets, which is why I'm taking this bet for Caleb Plant versus Canelo. A lot of people don't believe me that I'm picking Caleb Plant. I am picking Caleb Plant, and it's not out of a disdain for Canelo or anything like that, or me not submitting to any type of immortality. All fighters are not immortal, especially Caleb Plant after this fight. Caleb Plant can be beat, especially him in a division like this, when you got guys like David Benavidez crawling around. And who says that uh Canelo can't beat Caleb Plant, but he can't beat guys that will beat Caleb Plant in the future? Who says that those cycles won't happen in boxing? That's just the nature of the beast, believe it or not, when you're talking about boxing, period. It happens in every weight class, but you have to make sure that you're matching them right when they're at their best. And Canelo is at his best. Caleb Plant is at his best. David Benavidez is at his best right now, like during this time. So I'm just saying, like, it's nothing against Canelo. It's just me respecting the whole cycle of boxing, where some styles mesh with others, Believe it or not, when I look at heavyweight, Tyson Fury seems like he's immortal right now. And I've picked Tyson Fury for many, many fights since Vladimir Klitschko, since the all of the Deontay Wilder fights, believe it or not. But there are certain opponents stylistically that you would never expect him to sleep on. Well, I mean, that you would never expect to beat him. You might even be surprised that it's a cruiserweight, and I'm not even talking about Usyk. And I'm pretty sure that those of you who have been listening to all of my streams, all of my boxing talks and conversations everywhere else in the web, I'm pretty sure you guys understand who those contenders are at cruiserweight. And some of those guys can end up beating heavyweights that you are advocating for, or not advocating for, but you think that is going to be very successful in the long run. And when I look at Tyson Fury, who says that Deontay Wilder can't beat Tyson Fury? But, well, I mean, like, who says that since Wilder can't beat Fury, he can't beat a guy that just beat Fury? You know what I mean? If you get what I mean by that, which I'm pretty sure that y'all do. So that's why I believe in boxing, that there's cycles around here, that you gotta look at different opponents, different style matchups, man. It's not always based on resume all of the time. Sometimes you get prodigies out of that crop, Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. And I think we're still living in this idea of Mayweather Canelo, because everyone still has a lot of memories of that fight, where the prodigy lost to the experienced fighter. No matter how strong the prodigy was, no matter how young he was, no matter how skilled he was, well, he lost to one of the most experienced fighters of that generation and one of the most skilled fighters of that generation. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. But who's to say that Floyd, if he stuck around, he would have lost to somebody too, from the prospects that were around his time by the time that he retired? Personally, like Keith Thurman, Errol Spence. I know it sounds like blasphemous. I mean, not blasphemous. I shouldn't say that because that holds like a different term, but I know it sounds ridiculous. But at the same time, like, you got to think about it like this. Like, there's styles that will just like creep up upon somebody. And when you're overlooking that person's style, even though they've had like certain fights where they weren't as like notoriety, they didn't hold as much notoriety as the other guys' opponents that were kind of like a similar style, but it's still a learning process. And the fact that you have a lot of people around your camp, the fact that you have a lot of guidance, major guidance, like from big time fighters like Andre Ward, Floyd Mayweather, and you've gotten good sparring too. I'm not saying that sparring wins matches, bro. That's not what I'm saying. Otherwise, then I would have think that Errol Spence could beat everybody at 147 pounds because he does have an equal in Terrence Crawford. And Terrence Crawford isn't really known to be a guy that's known for his sparring stories besides Timothy Bradley, you know, because I've heard stories of Terrence Crawford getting hurt in sparring too. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that um, Terrence Crawford beats Errol Spence, you know. So you just gotta look at it a certain aspect, you know, like resumes really don't matter sometimes. And of course they play a role. They play certainly a role, but at the same time, like you gotta expect something that comes out of the ordinary, especially like if you're a guy that's been up there at the top for a long time and some prodigy that can box, that can stick and move, that can adjust on the fly, that can actually think outside the box, can throw off your game. He's not playing into the script that you want your opponents to. I could see that happening in a lot of scenarios, man, to mess up a fighter's psyche, you know, because they're so focused on draining the fight. No, absorbing the fighter into his world. You know, we saw that with Vladimir when he tried to absorb Tyson Fury into his world, but Tyson Fury wasn't really having that because Tyson Fury really believes that he has the ability to beat a guy like Klitschko. And I know that's not like a stylistic similarity to Canelo Plant, but it's still the same philosophy, still the same situation that you gotta keep into consideration, of course. So um, it's a lot to take in, like I said before. But what happens afterwards with Caleb Plant is gonna be amazing. You know, like there's a lot of great fights for him out there. There's a lot of great fights for Canelo if he loses. You know, it's not out. Believe it or not, it's not the end of Canelo like how a lot of people say it would be if Caleb Plant ended up beating Canelo. I mean, it's just another loss on his resume. That's really about it. He could still go down and weight, fight guys like Gennady Golovkin in a trilogy, or Jermall Charlo or Demetrius Andrade. Meanwhile, Caleb Plant can stick around at 168 pounds and fight David Benavidez. And if Demetrius Andrade, if Jermall Charlo wants to go up there, that well, Caleb Plant is always looking for an opponent up there too. So um, the fact that if Caleb Plant would win, it would be good for the sport, you know, because you got a fresh face there, and Canelo finally has like a contemporary, like an actual competitive contemporary. And I know Golovkin is out there, but at the same time, Golovkin is getting older, and Caleb Plant is around the same age bracket as Canelo, except he's like 2 years younger than him. So um, I'm all about like fresh faces in boxing, especially right now at heavyweight, because it's like ever changing with Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Usyk, and Deontay Wilder. You know, and as long as everyone is fighting each other, that's all that matters. Unlike the lower weight classes, where I see there's a bunch of people complaining about fighters like not fighting each other down there. You know, it's just a bunch of jaw jacking. That's it. That's all I really see down there. You know, and I'm glad that we're having some type of consolidation at 168 pounds, because at 168 pounds, it's long overdue, especially like with the WBSSs that were there the whole time. Like they didn't even make nothing of it. Like the first season that I saw the WBSS for the super middleweight division, like it would have been a lot more better if David Benavidez was in there, or Ramirez was in there when he was still at 168 pounds. And by the way, like let's talk about if Canelo would win, or like where Canelo would go, like if he lost. Like if Canelo would win, obviously he could go up to 175 pounds and fight Artur Beterbiev. That would be a great fight. Or Dmitry Bivol. But there's a lot of roles that Canelo can take. He could go back. I'm hearing that they want to look into a Golovkin trilogy, but I think it's a lot too soon for anybody to think about anything. And I could say the same thing for Plant. It's too soon for me to think about anything, you know what I mean, for Caleb Plant, besides obviously David Benavidez just breathing down his neck. So Canelo has a lot to go for it. But Caleb Plant, if he loses, man, it depends on the it depends on the fashion that he loses. If he loses in a competitive fashion, man, I still think that his stock will go up a lot more than people realize. He's not just gonna fade into obscurity or anything like that. If he were to box like at least I don't know, I'm just gonna throw a number out there, 8 rounds, 9 rounds, but then he's putting on a clinic and he's just like putting it on Canelo, but then at the same time he gets stopped by, I don't know, a cut or something. Well, I mean, if he stays in there, he doesn't quit or anything like that. Well, everyone's gonna give him more credit than damn Billy Joe Saunders who quit on his stool and shit. Man, that guy quit like a coward and shit. You know, he talked all that shit, does all of these like outside antics that make him look like a shitty person. Well, everyone's gonna respect Caleb Plant either ways, win or lose. Like after this Canelo fight, because I don't see Caleb Plant as that type of character, as a Billy Joe Saunders that likes to fuck around and you know, mess with people's lives and stuff like that. You know, so oh man, yeah, I've been going on for at least like 15 minutes, 16 minutes, but I'm just excited for this fight this coming Saturday. Uh, I'm thinking to myself, should I do a live reaction of it? But since I got work, I am gonna barely come into watching the main event, so I'm not gonna miss it. But at the same time, I plan on doing a live reaction, maybe like after the fight or maybe during the fight. You know, so keep an eye out for that, y'all. But I'm just waiting for more people to come in because I know that there's everyone waiting for a breakdown prediction out there, and I understand that everyone is really, really questioning a lot of people that are going for Caleb Plant. Well, I'll tell you this. I don't like it when everyone thinks that I'm a liar or that I don't know, that I don't really believe what I say when I'm predicting a fight or picking somebody to win. You're not talking to a guy with no profile picture on YouTube. You're not talking to a guy with that barely made this account like what's today? November 5th? A guy that made the account on November 4th, November 3rd, and just to put something out there just for the sake of putting something out there. No, man, I don't play like that. I just don't. And you could ask anybody that I know if I play like that or not. I really don't, to be honest. Like I really love going into details about what I say and what I predict in fights. So appreciate it, y'all. Uh hold up. All right, y'all, I'm back. Had to do something real quickly, but like I've said before, man, like I don't really play with these predictions. And if you're gonna question like me picking a fighter, I will elaborate on that, gladly elaborate on that. And um I'm not really gonna go back and forth about like the fighter's personality or going back and forth about gossip that happens outside or not. Cause when I'm predicting fights, man, like I'm always gonna study, do a lot of film study actually, like I've been doing all week, which is why it took a while for me to do that breakdown because I was watching a lot of fights that mattered in their career. And when I'm breaking down a fight, I look at a lot of stuff, I look at a lot of mistakes that they make, and I look at it from then to now, regardless of their competition. But if I see those continued habits, then of course I'm going to point them out and put them in a breakdown, you know? So, um, like I've said plenty of times, like these predictions, man, I don't play. I really don't play with them at all. So, um, the undercard, like for this fight, I'm not really that interested in. I haven't really heard anything about it, to be honest, because all I hear is like a bunch of other fights, but at the same time, I don't really hear nothing about the undercard being that great. And that's the problem too, like for these big fights. They don't have no big undercards. They don't have no uh like like very top level fighters fighting on it, like how some other cards of the past used to. And I think that would be a great value for money, especially if you're doing $100 pay-per-view, of course. Like I don't know if you put in a heavyweight fight, like even of top prospects fighting each other, or just some unifications on there from lower weight classes. Like it really shouldn't matter, but like I still want to see like some type of enthusiasm. I still want to see some type of energy being put towards the undercards instead of just some guys using it as an advantage to go to the store and buy some beer or carton of cigarettes or whatever they want from the store, just to come back and say, oh, it's still not on. Oh man, we got to go through this. Well, let me change the channel and all of that. I don't like that at all, because I really hate that too, especially when they change the channel from the boxing, because I still like sometimes watching the undercards, but I do agree that they got to up the competition, That's just my opinion about it. So, um, lot to digest this coming weekend, a lot to digest. So, when I see Canelo and Caleb Plant, they're looking great. You know what I mean? Like I saw the weigh in. A lot of people try to take like these notes, like they are still taking notes, especially for a fight like this. And I can understand like psychological advantages and stuff. But Caleb Plant did make a good point though about the audience and at the weigh-in. Like after they weighed in, I mean, you're not up here fighting. It's a difference between being in that seat. And I thought he made a great point about that. And Canelo's obviously a professional, man. It's not really thinking too much about Caleb Plant like that. And that's how he should think, because Canelo has seen a lot of stuff that's happened like before, with Iras Lara. Probably Caleb Plant has gotten on his nerves more than that because Caleb Plant pointed out a lot of stuff that happened outside the ring. Well, obviously, like the drug test and everything else. Well, I mean, both of them seem like they're going in very clean, like they've been doing testing for this fight. And that's why I'm very excited for it. So I'm really thinking to myself, you know what? I gotta be very, very vigilant though of the scorecards too, because everybody's being worried. Everyone is worried about the scorecards, whether they'll give it to Plan or not. But at one point, I used to think that it would be just a decision, for this fight. And when I picked Caleb Plant to win against Canelo, but I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I think they'll give Caleb Plant the benefit of the doubt if he makes it very, very convincing. And everyone's going to bring up the Golovkin fights. Everyone's going to bring up all these other fights from the past. But those fights, like that everyone calls controversial, were like 8-4 type of fights or 7-5 type of fights, and they weren't necessarily like major robberies where they could have been 9-3s or 10-2s type of fights. Where they are almost like rivaling like a Floyd Mayweather type of undercard. We've seen him win. Like we've seen some of these opponents actually win their own scorecards, especially Gennady Golovkin, and Gennady Golovkin gave Canelo like one of his toughest fights in recent years. That's why they had two fights together. That's why their both fights were very close. To me, the first fight was pretty close. That's my opinion about it. I mean, I've watched the sport for a long time, and um, that's what I think about it. The first fight was pretty close, and the second fight too. But it doesn't erase the fact that it was competitive and that Canelo had to show, had to go through some adversity. Because I remember Canelo, everyone's forgetting that he got cut in the second fight above the eyebrow, I think. But I know he got cut somewhere around that area. And who's to say that Caleb Plant would do a lot better than Gennady Golovkin? Because when I look at Gennady Golovkin compared to Caleb Plant, I mean, their resumes are not really that uh, wide ahead, besides like Golovkin having the Canelo fights. As I mentioned before in my breakdown, uh, Golovkin really only has Danny Jacobs and uh, what's his name? Sergey Derevyanchenko. And if you ask me, Uzcategui can beat the fuck out of David Lemieux. That's my opinion about it. And if you ask me, he could beat the shit out of Daniel Giao. Heck, hmm. Danny Jacobs, I don't know. Like, I don't think Danny Jacobs could beat Uzcategui because Uzcategui, everyone remembers when James DeGale ducked Jose Uzcategui. Literally said it himself that he would rather go for a money fight with Chris Eubank Jr. and not risk it all. Like, literally, he classified Jose Uzcategui as a bigger threat. And this is guy that went what, like the full 12 rounds in the fight of the year with Badu Jack, a guy that's at light heavyweight right now, and some think that he should be the regular champion. Because I'm confused about where this WBA title is at this point, whether it's with Bivol, whether it's with Jean Pascal. But to my point, Caleb Plant is not that far off from Gennady Golovkin, to be honest. Like, he's a lot more younger than Golovkin, more younger than what Golovkin is going to fight when Canelo fought Golovkin, and just a lot of stuff in that makes them very different. But at the same time, Caleb Plant is not too far off, giving problems to Canelo, just like Golovkin did, And Golovkin at the time was getting trashed on with his resume, like everyone still trashes on his resume to this day, you know what I mean? And who's to say that somebody like Caleb Plant can't give Canelo those same type of problems either? Everyone's going to point out the amateurs and all of that, but keep in mind that Golovkin has a very, very strict Eastern European style. Even though it was brought to the Americas, like he still couldn't like cover up those deficiencies. And there was this video that I was watching from Fight Hype, and it involved an interview with Michaela Mayer, and I had to agree with her about this one fighter in particular. She was talking about with Katie Taylor that she has too much of this European style. And I understood what she was saying, that these European styles are very stiff, very robotic at times. And there's some type of exceptions to the rule, but you could tell that those exceptions to the rule had some type of American tutelage down the line, but yet they still showed deficiencies themselves, like Sergey Kovalev, Gennady Golovkin, like I've said before, and even Lomachenko, because Lomachenko, despite having like this great offense, despite having this great footwork, he still lacks in a lot of departments, especially with his head movement. It's nothing like Canelo's either. So keep in mind that an Eastern European like style like Golovkin's was able to give Canelo problems. Think of what an American style would do with Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant can box well. Caleb Plant can think outside the box. He can vary his punches. It's a lot of things to consider. And that was my biggest problem with Golovkin. that he would not go to the body, that he wouldn't even change levels on his jab. He has one of the best jabs in boxing, but it's more so a power jab, and it's more so inclined to land on the head. And he doesn't really like jab to the body like that. He's not really that ring savvy, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't think outside the box. Let's just put it like that. He's just gonna go with what works for him. And he's a very stubborn fighter, and there's a reason why he left Abel Sanchez, you know, or like they had that falling apart regardless of who it was. Because I could tell that Golovkin is very stubborn, and he's just gonna stick to his old ways, you know. There's not gonna be no changes in him anytime soon. But yet he was still able to give Canelo a lot of problems in both fights still. So that's why, that's another reason I should say, and another illustration of me picking Caleb Plant, of course, and why I think Caleb Plant can actually do a lot better than a Gennady Golovkin. And everyone's going to talk about punch resistance. Punch resistance, I mean, everyone is talking about how Caleb Plant is this like paper skin type of individual, but he's still able to make it out of fights. And if you ask me, Jose Uzcategui is a pretty big puncher, believe it or not. And I think he cut Caleb Plant open in their fight. And Caleb Plant was still going on. He was fighting through adversity with blood in his vision. Like, he wasn't really like phased by that. He's been through some type of adversity. Everyone looks for that in certain fights, you know, especially if you get cut. So I think Uzcategui hits a lot harder than people give him credit for. There's a reason why he took out Durrell. And man, yeah, I've been talking for a while. I gotta take a breather, man. Gotta take a breather. But I really want to see where Jose Uzcategui goes from here. I know he lost to another guy recently, and the whole situation with the Benavidez fight falling out. Oh man, I really wanted to see that Benavidez fight too, believe it or not, because that would have really told me a lot about a future fight with Caleb Plant and David Benavidez, or David Benavidez versus Canelo. Because believe it or not, I have a very different opinion about Canelo versus David Benavidez than a lot of people out there. You know, it's a very, very winnable fight for Canelo, and it's a pretty winnable fight for David Benavidez. You know, but the longer it's prolonged, the sooner that Canelo jumps on David Benavidez, the more winnable it is. But in the long run, it could be completely different, you know, because boxing at that time is probably not going to want Canelo anymore. And they're going to try to do the same thing that they've done to Oscar, the same thing they've done to Julio, the same thing they tried to do to Floyd, you know what I mean, to look for another star, you know. So the future seems a lot more different than a lot of people realize. A lot of people realize. So, oh man, so tired, man. Like, I just got out of work and just like talking about this boxing coming this Saturday. And then obviously you got the Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter fight later on this month. And that's another fight I might make a bet on, but it's not going to be a big bet like how this Canelo Plant thing is. But it's still an interesting fight. And I see a lot of passionate fans. When I make bets on fights, and I believe that another fighter has a solid chance of winning, but the opponent that I'm picking him against is, well, like the opponent that I'm picking against has this passionate fan base. I always look for that in boxing, you know. And when I see passionate fans, they're really, really confident about their favorite fighter. And I think that's a good opportunity to make some bets, you know what I mean? So that's what I look into, you know what I mean? Well, that I'm starting to look into when I'm predicting some of these major fights, that there's a major underdog, or at least there's a major passionate fan base that believes that their fighter will succeed and is very immortal. So, um, as for this Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter fight, there's nobody that's being called immortal here. I mean, you got some Terrence Crawford fans out there, or just fans of boxing fans, period, that believe that Terrence Crawford won't lose to anybody in the welterweight division. But there's obviously going to be some contrarians. There's obviously going to be everyone saying Errol Spence, Errol Spence, Errol Spence, Jaron Ennis, Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, Keith Thurman. Ugas is in the mix too, but not as much as I thought he would be, because I see Ugas as a temporary champion, to be honest. I mean, if he fought a guy like Keith Thurman, Jaron Ennis, everyone is going to be thinking, I don't know. Like, that's what their mindset is right now. Like, if Ugas were to fight somebody, I don't think he's going to be holding that belt for so long. So, those are my thoughts on it. Appreciate it, y'all. For those of you that are going to watch the playback, like I've said before, my breakdown, my prediction is in the previous video. So if you want to watch it, it's over there. Well, I mean, obviously it's before this live stream that's going to be ending right now. But appreciate it, y'all. And looking forward to the fight this coming Saturday. I will be on after the fight for sure, but I'm not sure if I'll do a live reaction in real time watching the fight. So I'm definitely excited. Been waiting for this all year, and I was hoping this fight would actually happen since Canelo even campaigned at 168 pounds. So appreciate it, y'all, and I'm already out, y'all. Peace.